But when somebody does a good job, it's important to step up and tell them, and then tell them in front of people, hey, good job.
Welcome to Friday 5 with Dave Adams. Today I'm going to be speaking with Michael Goad, CEO of Dow Chemical Employees Credit Union. Michael has only been CEO at the credit union since April of this year. And during that short time, the last couple of months, he's had to deal with a global pandemic, as well as 2 dams breaking in the Midland area and severe flooding in that area, which he'll talk about. But Michael has extensive CFO experience, having served as a CFO at several banks and credit unions, as well as Cornerstone University from 2001 to 2005 as CFO. He has some experience with Sunbank in Miami. And as I said, his CFO and analytical experience is extensive. He joined Dow Chemical Employees Credit Union in 2018, January of 2018 as CFO. And as I said, became CEO in April of this year. The credit union has $2 billion in assets, 71,000 members, and 153 employees. It's a model of efficiency among large credit unions. And I know you're going to enjoy this conversation that I'm going to have with Michael Goad. Well, Michael, welcome to Friday 5 with Dave Adams. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Hey, good afternoon. Happy sunny day in Michigan.
Yeah, we hope we get a lot more of these as we start to head toward winter. I noticed that our low temps down here in Southeast Michigan we hit the freezing point for the first time last night. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll have a nice sunny fall as we transition to winter. Well, it's good to have you on the podcast with me. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. As I mentioned in the introduction, your bio takes you to the credit union industry by way of the banking sector, which is true for many within our industry, including myself. And I'm really looking forward to getting your perspectives on your career journey and leadership and a whole bunch of other things. But let's get right to it. So give us kind of the summary version of your career journey and how you landed in credit unions in your role as CEO of Dow Chemical Employees Credit Union.
Wonderful. And this is deja vu because I told you this story when we first met at a conference in Miami, and it's a Miami story. So I love telling people about this because it all goes back to 1988 when I was working at Sunbank in Miami, Florida, a super bank, very well run. But my wife, Claudia, was working at the Dade County School Employees Federal Credit Union. And through the years, we got to know each other's organizations. We went to the Christmas parties. I got to know the CEO and the EVP there, and I got a feel for the mission and the culture and just what it was like to be at a credit union. And even though I stayed in banking, we talked about it for years that, oh, one day it's going to be really neat to jump into the credit union world and have that different sense of mission. So we were in Miami for 5 years. And then moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, went to work for Old Kent Bank and was in financial modeling, treasury, M&A, capital planning. And when Fifth Third bought Old Kent, I decided to jump out of the big bank world. And it was neat because I got connected with Cornerstone University. And that's where I really felt my first charge of stewardship. You know, you can show stewardship working for a publicly traded bank. You're doing your job, you're doing what's right. But then when you're at a university and it's, oh, we're doing this for the students, we're doing this for the alumni, it was such a neat mission feeling. And I jumped then back into banking and was a CFO of 2 sister banks, the Bank of Holland and the Bank of Northern Michigan. Did that for 7 years, 2 very well-run banks. But I had the opportunity to get into the credit union world in 2012, and I jumped at it. I was really ready for that mission and that culture. And so I joined Lake Michigan Credit Union, was with them for a year, and then ended up down in South Bend, Indiana with Tom Gripe at the Notre Dame Federal Credit Union. Did that for 4 years, and we did a number of neat things there. But then I had the opportunity to join Dennis Hansen and the team up here at Dow. And so we moved back to the Mitten in early 2018, and we've really loved being here. And then I became the CEO April 1st, in the middle of everything that's been going on. So it's been quite a journey. But again, I love to talk about it because I was so impacted all the way back then, and I felt that difference, and then had the opportunity to get in and really start feeling the mission and feeling the culture. And I've really loved it. So it's been a great move.
So I hope this isn't too personal, but I have to ask if Claudia has continued her credit union path, or did she take a hiatus from that?
She took a hiatus, but she did go back to work while we were in South Bend. She went to work for another credit union down there, and she's always remained a big fan. So it's been neat. It's been a big part of our life.
That's great. I'm sure she gave you a helpful nudge when she heard of your opportunities with first with Lake Michigan and now certainly with Dow Chemical Employees as CEO. So kind of segueing from that career journey, let's talk a little bit first before we talk about leadership. Let's talk about some of the differences. You and I had a sidebar conversation about credit unions and banks and the rift between banks and credit unions at times legislatively. And what I shared with you is that I think it's an exception when we have rhetoric in our industry. It's an unfortunate exception when we sort of vilify banks or make them out to be evil or bad, because in fact, as you and I discussed, there's a critically important role for banks, and some of our best leaders in the credit union industry have come in some form or fashion from the banking sector. So maybe just share your thoughts on that dynamic, the differences between banks and credit unions.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that before I joined and then after I joined the industry. And I think that we would all agree that for-profit companies are not bad by nature, okay? Our country is powered by the concept of return on investment, okay? And we need that. However, there is a role for nonprofits and there's a role for cooperatives. And when it comes to retail and business banking, credit unions are offering what I believe to be a superior model, and they give superior service and value to the consumer. And in our world, we get to call them members or member owners. And so I don't have anything against Dow Chemical Inc. They're for profit. I don't have anything against Chase. They're for profit. But when it comes to financial services, I really do think that the credit unions are offering a better service and a better model.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And, I think the bankers associations, all associations have their niche, and sometimes we twist our rhetoric in unfortunate ways. But I think sometimes in some parts of the banking industry, probably driven by some associations at times, they try to characterize credit unions as not being part of the free enterprise capitalistic economy that we have. And the reality is, as I'm sure you would attest to, we're all in the banking business. We're all providing banking services. It's the structure that's different. And I don't think it's any more appropriate for credit unions to vilify banks and make them out to be big and bad and greedy and profit hungry any more than it is right for bankers to characterize credit unions as taking a free ride because of our tax status. We're just different in terms of the structure, right?
Right. And I would tell you, my quick take on the tax status, it's not one for one, okay? But instead of paying taxes at the corporate level here, we give people extra interest on their deposits, which means they have to claim that on their tax return and pay taxes on that, okay? Or we charge them less interest on their mortgage loans, and then when they do their taxes, they have a smaller deduction, and so they're paying more taxes because they're getting more value. So I really don't think that the tax law difference between credit unions and banks is that big of a dollar impact to the U.S. Treasury as it's made out to be.
And we're certainly not putting Wells Fargo and Chase and Citibank out of business anytime soon. But let's segue. We'll come back to the credit union difference. I think there are a lot of interesting angles that we can take there. But let's talk about leadership. I'm very impressed by your background in finance as a CFO in both banks, credit unions, and other organizations, your analytical background that prepared you for this CEO role. But talk about your leadership lessons, maybe some things that you've learned along the way that you think are important for credit union CEOs today.
Right. Well, a couple things. Number one, I've only been CEO since April 1. So I'm still making mistakes and learning about this job, you know. Another observation I would say is that I'm 56 now. I am such a better banker, a better credit union person, a better leader than I was when I was younger. And I would not give that up for anything. I'll take the age for all that's come along with it, Dave, because I can say, oh yeah, I made that mistake in 2008. I made that mistake in 1993. I saw somebody make that mistake in 1988. The cumulative learning of all the years and the different organizations and the different roles has really been a benefit. And then I'd also tell you a couple things that I wished I'd have known earlier, but just learned along the way. And an important one is affirming people and displaying empathy wherever possible. Okay, so I don't believe in being a rah-rah person where everyone gets a trophy and everyone wins all the time. But when somebody does a good job, it's important to step up and tell them, and then tell them in front of people, hey, good job. I'm also very careful to use the word trust as much as possible. Oh, I trust you. I know you worked on this. I trust that it's good. I had somebody the other day say, I'd like you to look this over for me. And I looked at the issue they were dealing with and I said, you know what? You're a strong professional. I trust you with this. Oh, wow. The CEO trusts me with this.
Powerful. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very powerful.
And it's also important to be able to say, you know what? I was wrong. And I'm kind of a hard charger. I'm an ideas person. And I can get started off in a direction. And guess what? I was too hot and ready to go. And I got to come back and say, thank you for questioning me. Thank you for bringing that up. I was wrong. So those are some key things that I've learned.
Those are excellent. And, when I asked the question, I realized I asked it way too narrowly when I asked, for advice and lessons learned for CEOs, because really credit unions, most effective and best leaders are throughout the credit union, right? The C-suite and even frontline staff. And so leadership skills and leadership lessons apply much more broadly than just to CEOs. So I appreciated it when you started off by saying, hey, I've only been a CEO actually since April, but I'm still learning, I'm still making mistakes. And I have to tell you that throughout my career, well, I guess this observation, I think if we're not making mistakes as leaders, we're not stretching far enough, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
And it goes with the territory. Well, so those leadership lessons, and I think it's so powerful to hear you talk about empathy and trust and having the humility to say, you know what, I think I called that one wrong or I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that just makes leaders more human and more authentic and more approachable to staff?
Right. It does. And, years ago, there was the great leader theory of leadership. Okay. And I really believe that has pretty much gone by the wayside. And there's more of a great team leader, but the companies and the organizations, the credit unions, are run by teams that work well together. And I'll give you my last leadership lesson that I've learned over time. When I was younger, I was a hard driver, always been an achiever, and just thinking about, I'm going to get the job done well. The more I moved into management and now into leadership, I've learned that it's the effective team that works well together, and you just don't snap your fingers and have a group do that. It takes time and practice. It takes lunches together. It takes coffee together. It takes just calling during the day. And what I've learned here, even in my couple of years here, is that my goal is that we talk so much about all the issues. By the time we get to the outcome meeting, we kind of have had half-baked already. By the time we get to the board meeting, we have such a good relationship and communication between the leaders. I can call on somebody without warning them. Oh, hey, we've been talking about this lately. Why don't you update the board on that? I didn't warn them ahead of time, but we've had such good ongoing communication that it just flows right into the meeting. So to me, that has really been revolutionary because it takes the pressure off, oh, the leader has to be so perfect, versus no, we're going to coordinate a team. We're going to practice basketball so much together. We're going to play on Saturdays together. We're going to hang out together so that when it comes time to play the game, we're used to playing basketball together. So that's been a really neat thing that I've learned over the years.
It's really great perspective, Michael. I have to admit that I'm still learning that, and that's one of those things that I can say, looking in the rearview mirror, I wish I had learned that earlier, and that is to describe it a little bit differently. But it's to realize that relationships and, like you said, empathy and humility and authenticity go so far toward helping to get people to work as a team and to trust you, as opposed to when I was younger, I would kind of go in a linear fashion.
Right.
ABC, got to get this done quick, get it done right. So I really appreciated that perspective. And I think it also segues nicely to what I'd like to follow up on a bit. We talked about the credit union difference between credit unions and banks a bit earlier, but I think this reference to the empathy and humility and warmth in our culture really dovetails with
Yep.
how we want to treat our members. And so maybe talk a little bit more about how you see excellent member service and the credit union difference in terms of how it needs to play out in serving your members.
Right. So this is a neat one because, I've came up through the finance area, risk and return and all that. And as I've come to the credit union world, I've been thinking about what's the right thing to do. How do you manage a credit union? What do you do with the idea of return on capital for a credit union? And really, I've come to this conclusion that there are different approaches, okay? So here at Dow, okay, we have a huge emphasis on efficiency. We have a single site, we have low overhead, digital banking, consistent patronage dividends, okay? And so that has been our approach at Dow. And everyone's familiar with how we do that. We have loan rebates. January 1st of this past year, we gave out $20 million of loan rebates, given interest back or given extra interest on deposits. So that is serving the members. When I was at Notre Dame, though, we were also serving the members, but we had an extensive branch network. We had a whole bunch of ATMs, especially on campus, and we knew it. Now, we watched our expenses and we were careful, but we knew that we were providing a service dividend. And I love that term. We were providing a service dividend by having more branches. We could have closed some of them, forced people to drive, maybe lose some members, but we didn't. We had a good network of branches, all those ATMs, and that was our service to the members. And they appreciated it and let us know that they appreciated it. So it's neat. You can deliver the value to members in different ways as long as you're making sure the member's getting the value.
I love that reference to different models, and I'll tell a quick story. A few years ago, I was touting DFCU Financial, at the time our largest credit union in Michigan, and their patronage dividend that they introduced. I think it was just at the beginning of the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that as an example of the credit union model, whereas Comerica was relocating its headquarters to greener economic pastures, DFCU was doing its patronage dividend. Now, this is something that Dow Chemical Employees credit union has done for many years. But I was taken to task by a credit union CEO of another credit union, because he pointed out to me, rightfully so, that not all credit unions follow that efficiency patronage dividend model. Like you said, with the Notre Dame credit union, there are different ways to come at the member value proposition. And I think that's so true. But the one universal truth is that credit unions are focused on providing service and value in unique ways compared to the for-profit sector. And it's not that one is better or worse than the other. It's that I think credit unions, with their not-for-profit structure and their tax-exempt status, have a license to and a responsibility to provide service in different ways than the for-profit sector can do. And they can do things that we can't do, right?
Right.
So, taking that credit union difference and kind of parlaying it into the environment we're in. So, wow, your timing was interesting to become actually CEO in April. I know you were on the team prior to that as CFO, but as you take the reins now during this COVID pandemic and the associated tough economic times, how are you approaching business at Dow Chemical Employees Credit Union in terms of serving your member needs? And what do you see further out on the horizon?
Right. Well, first of all, I've got to start by giving tons of credit to Dennis Hansen, CEO for 28 years, an amazing man, okay? The team here and the board, they put together just an #1 business model. And so the #1 thing for Michael Goad is don't screw it up, right? But we got to keep moving forward. And so we're looking at ways to make the credit union better in different ways and to keep moving forward and to building our membership. Let me talk just a little bit about 2020. Wow, what a year that none of us expected. And so we've all dealt with the virus. We were very quick to close our lobby. Right now, we still have 20%, we still have 60% of our employees working remotely. And so we are allowing walk-ins for the lobby by appointment only, and we're doing drive-through. And we're getting good reports from our membership, and we don't plan on changing that until something gets materially better with the virus. We went, back in March, we went from having 12 of our people who had laptops and VPN to having 134 people with laptops and VPN. We did that in the span of 1 week. We were out crawling through Best Buy and other places buying laptops. And we also had a business continuity planning partner that we ordered 75 laptops from. So the IT team here did an amazing job of outfitting everyone, of rerouting our member contact center calls so we could handle them remotely. Just neat stuff. Oh, and then, by the way, we had a flood in Midland. So back in the middle of May, we had the flood, and we closed our building actually May 19th and 20th. When you hear on the radio that one dam has failed and maybe a next dam could fail, you don't know what kind of wall of water might be coming towards town. And we didn't know, could it get all the way from the river up here? So the good news is we already had so many people working remotely. Our digital banking, our member call center, all of our digital services were uninterrupted, even though we walked away from the building and locked it up for 2 days. And then the neatest thing that I'm really pleased with, and I was going to say proud, but I'm proud of the industry for this, okay? After the flood, the Mid-Michigan chapter came together, and with some seed money from the Michigan Credit Union Foundation that gave $10,000, a number of other credit unions put money in, and we built a pool of $164,000, okay? And I want to call out some individuals because Kristen Tabor at Members First, Greg Dietrich at Frankenmuth, Bridget Stefalino at Jolt, Jenny Hoyle at Isabella, and my own Lisa Gray here at Dow. They really got together, and they work. You only see this in the credit union world. They worked as such a team, caring about each other's institution and caring about each other's members. And the group was able to take applications and award 328 grants to members of different credit unions. And they were $500 grants to offset flood costs. And so that was just an amazing enterprise that happened in the midst of managing all the events after the flood.
What a wonderful story. And you know, it just segues or dovetails so nicely with what we were just talking about creating a caring culture with our teams, mm-hmm. and then parlaying that into the credit union difference in the way our services are provided. But it also speaks to the community commitment and the collaboration and the willingness of credit unions to come together in a crisis,
right,
to help take care of those needs. That is a wonderful story, and kudos to you and Lisa and the Dow Chemical Employees Credit Union team, as well as the other credit unions that you referenced in the chapter. We were proud to be a part of that. But wow, you've had your hands full. So just since you took over officially as CEO, we have this major health pandemic. You had 2 dams break that created the flooding there, and so many other challenges. So for a big credit union that runs lean and mean like yours does, $2 billion in assets, 71,000 members, only 153 employees, which is very few for a credit union of that size. Running as efficiently as you do, and when you have a crisis like that emerge, what are some of the important things that you think about when you have to rally to, whether it's the flooding or whether it's the pandemic, and changing the way that you do the service delivery?
Yeah. So I would tell you, there's a lesson from, you've probably read about the airliner that lost their hydraulics and the captain that landed it in Iowa. And a number of people ended up dying, but a number of people ended up living. And the management lesson from that is, when he faced the crisis, they got everyone in the cockpit, and he turned, instead of telling people what to do, he turned around and said, "Does anybody have any good ideas?" Okay. And
Yeah.
so a key for us was getting the senior leadership team together, which is like 13 people. And at the time, we still had Dennis here plus me, and everyone knew that he was the CEO and I was going to be the CEO. But we turned around and said, "Does anybody have any good ideas?" And that group started from the get-go working as a level playing field team. And we made it very important to have updated communication with our staff and with our members. And so I would say that those were the 2 most important things that I observed, was creating a problem-solving atmosphere of teamwork, and then the continuous communication with members and with staff.
That's such a great story. And I was chuckling a little bit because my wife, Evelyn, and I actually watched the movie Sully last night,
Mm-hmm.
about pilot Sullenberg, who, the Miracle on the Hudson, who landed that plane after both engines went out. And I recall a scene from that movie, that very thing, where he turned to the co-pilot and said, "Do you have any ideas?" He had like 30 seconds to decide whether to turn back and try to land at LaGuardia or land on the Hudson, which they did. But that's such a great anecdote in a moment of crisis where you're having to move quickly, pull the team together, and just start by having the humility to say, "Okay, ideas," right?
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, let's segue to the last question here, which is helping us. You're relatively new to the Michigan Credit Union movement, and as we all want to get better acquainted, it's so difficult to do that in this environment. So it's one of the reasons I'm grateful for these podcasts. Help us get acquainted with Michael Goad when you're not working long hours at the credit union. What are
Hey,
your interests?
so first of all, so our kids are up and gone. People ask if we have kids, and I say we have adults. So none of our kids live in Midland. And so we make sure that we take trips to go see them often. And so my son and his wife were living in Montreal for a couple of years. Thankfully, they're now in Grand Rapids. And so we get to see them more often. I have a daughter that just graduated from college and took a job on the north side of Nashville. And then another daughter that's in Chattanooga down in Tennessee. So we like to travel to visit and see them. Secondly, we are smitten by the mitten, and we love the outdoors here in Michigan. And when there's not snow on the ground, you've got to get out and do things. So we have a smaller boat, and we tow it all around Michigan. We went to Saugatuck and back and did boating there all day and drove home this year. We went to Traverse City. We went to Petoskey. We went to Charlevoix. We've been boating over here. And so we just love all the natural resources in Michigan. And then I've been a runner and a basketball player, and shockingly, my knees still let me run. And so I love to run and try to be outdoors and stay in shape as much as possible. And then also, Claudia and I are active with some nonprofits. There are some church ministries, but then there's also, I'm helping out with the Midland Center for the Arts and their Symphony Council, and Claudia works with a local food kitchen and some other nonprofits. So even though the kids are gone, we're staying busy and enjoying life here.
Sounds like you live a well-rounded life, and I I couldn't agree more about Michigan. We're so blessed. I've lived here 23 years, and I love the beauty of Michigan, especially in the summer and fall. And boating, I'm a big boating enthusiast as well. So it sounds like you're doing a good job discovering all that Michigan has to offer.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you for a great discussion. I've really appreciated personally the opportunity to get to know you better and to learn from your management style and your career journey and your personal perspectives. Thank you very much for being on Friday 5 with me.
Dave, thank you. And thanks for what you and the team are doing at the Michigan Credit Union League. It's awesome.
Thanks so much. Well, that was a great conversation with Michael Goad. I haven't known Michael for very many years because he's new to our industry and new to Dow Chemical Employees Credit Union. But I had an opportunity to socialize with Michael and his wife, Claudia, several years back in Miami, and have gotten acquainted with him and have really appreciated his perspectives. He shared with us some great views on leadership, the importance of realizing that as a leader, you have to make mistakes to learn, and you have to create a culture that is affirming, that is empathetic, that fosters trust, and that shows humility, being willing to admit that you're wrong from time to time. Great perspectives. And I loved how Michael talked about with their model of efficiency and patronage dividends, that there's more than one way to show the credit union difference. There are different models that work different ways, but it's all about leveraging the not-for-profit structure of credit unions to provide top-notch service and value to members. Thanks so much to Michael Goad for sharing those perspectives. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure you did as well. We look forward to future episodes of Friday 5 with Dave Adams.